The sun had not yet risen when Jonas McCall stepped out of his small ranch house. The sky was still a deep blue, with only a thin line of soft gold appearing behind the distant hills. Jonas liked to begin his day before the land woke up. He said it made the world feel wide and peaceful, as if he had it all to himself. He buckled the saddle on his old chestnut horse, Ranger, and patted its neck. "Just a quick ride," he murmured. One of his young calves had been missing for 2 days, and even though wolves or storms were rare in this part of the territory, Jonas always checked things himself. He set out across the open fields, letting the cool morning air brush across his face. The land stretched far around him, yellow grass, small shrubs, and scattered mesquite trees. In the distance, the red cliffs of the mesa rose like a wall against the brightening sky. Jonas had lived on this land for years and knew every turn, every rock, every low hill. He enjoyed the quiet, he enjoyed the space, and most of all, he enjoyed that nobody expected anything from him. Life had taught him that people could be complicated, and he preferred to keep his circle small. But that morning would change everything. He guided Ranger toward a narrow path leading up the mesa. The calf sometimes wandered there, and Jonas hoped he would find it quickly. As he climbed higher, the wind picked up, carrying the faint smell of juniper. He breathed deeply. Mornings like this reminded him why he stayed. He reached the top of the mesa just as the sun pushed above the horizon, turning the whole sky into orange glass. Jonas looked slowly across the flat expanse. No sign of the calf. But he saw something else, something that made him pull Ranger to a halt. At first, he thought it was a trick of the light. 2 shapes hung still near a cluster of rocks. They looked small, like 2 young saplings bent by the wind. Jonas narrowed his eyes, trying to see better. As he rode closer, his chest tightened with a strange sense of worry. The shapes were not saplings, they were 2 girls. Jonas jumped off Ranger before the horse had even stopped moving. His boots thudded on the ground as he rushed forward. The girls were suspended by a rope tied to a low, twisted branch sticking out from the rock. Their feet barely touched the ground, and their heads leaned forward, as if they were asleep. For a moment, Jonas stopped breathing. His hands shook before he forced himself to move again. He stepped carefully toward them and spoke softly. "Can you hear me?" His voice echoed lightly on the stone. To his shock, one girl's fingers moved. Just a twitch, but enough to tell him they were still alive. A strong wave of relief washed over him. So strong he had to steady himself against the rock. He reached up to loosen the rope and lower the girls safely to the ground. Their breathing was faint, but present. Their faces were pale, and dust covered their hair and clothes. Jonas recognized the beaded necklaces and woven cloth around their shoulders. They were Apache, very young, maybe 10 or 11 years old. He felt a deep pull in his chest, the kind that told him he could not leave them here. But he also knew the reality of the territory. Helping Apache children could bring trouble. Some settlers did not trust anyone who wasn't like them. Some people jumped to conclusions without knowing the truth, and others simply looked for reasons to stir up fear. Jonas knelt beside the girls and looked across the mesa, wondering who had left them there. There were no tracks he could clearly identify. No distant riders. No sign of what had happened. He carefully lifted the smaller girl first. She was surprisingly light, as if she hadn't eaten well in days. Her dark hair fell across her face, and he gently brushed it aside. Her eyelids fluttered at his touch. She tried to speak, but no sound came out. "It's all right," Jonas whispered. "You're safe now. I'll take you home." His voice was steady, even though his heart was racing. The second girl stirred when he picked her up. Her eyes opened slightly, revealing deep brown irises full of confusion. She looked at him for one brief moment before closing them again. As if trusting him without knowing why, Jonas carried them both to Ranger. The horse stepped calmly to the side as Jonas settled the girls across the saddle, securing them so they wouldn't slip. He mounted behind them, holding them gently but firmly so they stayed balanced. As he started down the mesa trail, the sun warmed their backs. Jonas tried to keep his mind on the path, but questions kept flooding in. Who were these girls? Why were they alone on the mesa? Who had left them like that? And were those people still nearby? He listened carefully for hoofbeats or voices, but all he heard was the wind pushing through the grass. When they reached the open plains, Jonas nudged Ranger into a slow but steady pace toward the ranch. It was a long ride, nearly an hour. The girls leaned against him, their breathing uneven but improving with each minute. Jonas glanced down often to make sure they were still all right. He thought about taking them to the town doctor, but that idea vanished quickly. People in town talked too much, and talk traveled faster than dust on a dry day. Someone might claim the girls did something wrong. Someone might try to take them, and Jonas knew enough about the world to understand that sometimes the safest place was the quietest one. "I'll keep you safe," he whispered to them again, more to reassure himself than anything. When the ranch house finally came into view, a small wooden building with a tin roof and a barn beside it, Jonas felt a wave of determination. He carried each girl carefully inside and placed them on his bed. He covered them with a clean wool blanket and lit a small fire in the stove to warm the room. The girls lay still, breathing softly. Jonas brought water in a cup and touched it to their lips. The older girl swallowed slowly. The younger one moved her head slightly as if feeling comfort for the first time in days. Ranger snorted outside, sensing Jonas's tension. Jonas gave him a quick pat through the open window and then returned to the girls. For hours, he stayed near them, checking their breathing, brushing dust from their hair, and trying to understand the strange feeling pulling at him. He had lived alone for so long, he had forgotten what it felt like to worry for someone else. But the worry was there now, strong, real, and growing. As the day went on, the girls began to wake in small moments. The older one opened her eyes briefly, looked around with fear, then relaxed when she saw Jonas sitting at the foot of the bed. The younger one whispered something in Apache, but Jonas did not understand the words. He only responded with a gentle, "You're safe here." Still, their faces held shadows of something they had seen or heard before Jonas had found them. Something that made them quiet and guarded, even in safety. Jonas sat by the window that evening, watching the sun sink behind the hills. The land looked peaceful again, as if nothing strange had ever happened. But Jonas knew better. Something had brought those girls to that mesa. Something had left them there, and something or someone might come looking. He did not know the answers yet. But he did know this. His life had changed that morning. The wide, quiet world he enjoyed had shifted, and he was no longer alone. The next morning came softly, with gentle light slipping through the small window of Jonas's room. He had slept in a chair by the bed, his hat still resting on his chest. The two girls lay under the warm wool blanket, breathing quietly. For the first time since he found them, their faces looked calm. Jonas stretched his stiff legs and stood up. The wooden floor creaked under his boots as he walked toward the stove to warm a kettle of water. He moved quietly so he wouldn't frighten the girls. He had no idea what they had gone through before he found them, but he sensed it had left them nervous and unsure. As the water heated, Jonas looked back at the bed. The older girl opened her eyes. She did not move, but she watched him carefully, as if trying to decide whether she was safe. Jonas gave her a small, gentle smile. "Good morning," he said softly. "You're all right here. No one will bother you." She blinked, her dark lashes brushing her cheeks. After a moment, she slowly sat up. Her hair fell over her shoulders like a soft curtain. Jonas noticed that she looked stronger than the day before, though still tired. The younger girl woke soon after. She sat up with a quick breath, glancing around the room in surprise, until she saw her sister beside her. Then she relaxed instantly and leaned close to her. Jonas approached the bed with a bowl of warm broth he had made from vegetables. He held it out carefully. "You can eat if you want," he said, keeping his voice slow and calm. The older girl looked at the bowl, then at him. She said something in Apache, soft, short, and impossible for Jonas to understand. But her tone sounded polite, not afraid. He set the bowl on a small table beside the bed. "Take your time." He stepped back, giving them space. The girls looked at each other, then reached for the bowl. They shared it quietly, taking small sips. The younger one smiled faintly after her second sip. Jonas felt a warm feeling grow in his chest. It had been a long time since anyone smiled in his home. As the morning went on, the girls grew more awake. They explored the simple room with slow, cautious eyes. Jonas noticed them paying attention to the window, the door, and the small shelf where he kept his few belongings. They seemed to be studying the place, trying to understand where they were and whether it was safe. Jonas sat down on the chair again. "My name is Jonas," he told them gently. "Jonas McCall." The older girl pressed her hand to her chest, then said something like, "Nalin." The younger one repeated a similar gesture and said her name, which sounded like, "Dashi." Jonas nodded. "Nalin. Dashi. Good names." The girls exchanged a look. Maybe surprised he spoke their names kindly. Jonas hoped it helped them feel more at ease. Throughout the day, he tried to communicate with simple gestures. He pointed to items in the room, blanket, water, boots, and said the English words. The girls watched closely, repeating a few sounds, sometimes sharing quick whispers in their own language. Jonas didn't mind the quiet moments. He had lived in silence for years, but this silence felt different, gentler, warmer. Around midday, Jonas stepped outside to chop a bit of firewood. He didn't want to go far from the house. As he worked, he kept an ear open for any unusual sounds. Part of him worried that someone might come looking for the girls. Another part of him hoped that no one even knew they existed. He stacked the wood neatly near the wall. The sun was bright, and a soft wind rustled the dry grass. When he walked back inside, he found Nalin standing near the window. She turned quickly, startled, but relaxed when she recognized him. "You can look outside," Jonas assured her. "It's safe." Nalin gazed at him for a moment, her eyes calm but curious. She pointed at the distant hills and said something in Apache. Jonas shook his head lightly. "I don't know what that means, but yes, they're beautiful." The younger girl, Dashi, came over holding a small wooden carving Jonas had made years ago. It was shaped like a horse. She showed it to him with bright eyes. "You like that?" he asked. She nodded eagerly. Jonas chuckled softly. "Then you keep it." Dashi hugged the carving to her chest and smiled again, a full smile this time, wide and sweet. Jonas felt something shift inside him once more. These girls were young, innocent, and full of life. Whatever had happened to them had not taken their hope away. He admired that. But along with the warmth he felt, there was also a growing unease. Several times throughout the afternoon, Jonas noticed small things that didn't sit right with him. He found strange footprints near the barn. Not from any animal he recognized. The latch on his back gate was lowered, though he hadn't touched it that day. And when he checked Ranger, the horse seemed unsettled, glancing toward the hills as if sensing something. Jonas told himself it might be nothing. But a part of him, the part that learned to read signs from the land, whispered that something was watching. He closed the barn door securely and returned to the house. As evening came, he prepared a simple meal from beans, corn, and bread. The girls sat quietly at the table, their hands folded neatly. When he placed the plates before them, they waited until he sat down too. As if following a custom they had learned since childhood. Jonas took a bite first to show them it was safe. Then they began to eat. It was slow at first, but they soon relaxed into a comfortable rhythm. After dinner, the sky outside turned deep purple. Jonas lit a lantern and placed it on the table. The soft glow made the room feel warm. Nalin sat across from him, her hands wrapped around the carved horse Dashi had given back to her for safekeeping. Jonas watched her for a moment, then asked, "Do you remember anything about yesterday?" She met his eyes briefly, then looked down. Her fingers tightened around the wooden horse. She seemed to be choosing her words or perhaps deciding if she trusted him enough to try. Finally, she said a short phrase in Apache. Jonas didn't understand the meaning, but the tone carried a mix of sadness and worry. Dashi came closer and whispered something into Nalin's ear. The older girl nodded slowly. Jonas leaned back in his chair. "It's all right if you don't want to speak about it," he said softly. "You're safe here. That's all that matters." Nalan looked up again and studied his face. Jonas sensed she was searching for something, maybe honesty, maybe kindness, maybe a reason to trust him. After a few seconds, she seemed satisfied. But later, as the girls prepared for bed, Jonas noticed something unusual. When Nalan pulled back her sleeve to wash her hands, Jonas saw a small mark on her wrist. It was shaped like a symbol, carefully carved into a piece of leather tied around her wrist. Jonas had seen many patterns and markings from different tribes, but this one was unfamiliar. It looked new and purposeful. Nalan quickly pulled her sleeve back down, as if she didn't want him to ask about it. Jonas pretended not to notice, letting her keep her secret. But inside, his thoughts swirled. A strange symbol, footprints near his barn, a loose gate latch, a feeling of being watched. It was as if someone had followed them, or someone was looking for the girls. That night, when Jonas stepped outside to check the sky, he paused. The wind was still, but the air felt charged with quiet tension. The moonlight revealed nothing unusual, yet Jonas sensed something hidden beyond the shadows. When he returned inside, the girls were already asleep, curled close together under the blanket. Jonas stood at the doorway watching them for a moment, feeling both protective and uneasy. He knew that the peace inside his home was fragile. He knew the world outside was shifting, and he knew that the girls had not told him everything. But he also knew one more thing. Whatever their story was, he was now part of it. The next morning was quiet, almost too quiet. Jonas woke early, as he always did. But he noticed something different the moment he stepped outside. The air felt still, the kind of stillness that made a person pause and listen. Even the birds were slow to sing. Jonas checked the barn first. Ranger stood inside, calm now, though he gave a small snort as Jonas approached. Jonas stroked the horse's head and whispered, "Easy, boy. Everything's fine." But even as he said the words, he knew something around him felt unsettled. He walked the fence line, his boots pressing softly into the dry soil. He kept his eyes open, looking for anything out of place. The footprints he had noticed the day before were no longer fresh, but they hadn't faded completely either. They were still there, reminding him that someone had been close. Too close. He pushed the thought aside for the moment and returned to the house. Inside, he found Nalan and Dashi sitting at the small kitchen table, waiting quietly. They seemed a little stronger today, but they still stayed close together, as if they were each the other's safe place. Jonas smiled gently. "Morning," he said. The girls nodded. Dashi lifted the small wooden horse, holding it like a treasure. Nalan watched Jonas with calm eyes, though he could tell she was still paying attention to everything around her. She was young, but she was aware more than most children her age. Jonas made breakfast and set the plates in front of them. They ate slowly, still careful and polite. Sometimes they whispered to each other, their words soft as leaves touching in the wind. Jonas wished he could understand what they were saying, but even without knowing the language, he could tell their conversations were important. After breakfast, Jonas stepped outside again. The sun had risen high enough to brighten the land, and he took a deep breath. He needed to check the area beyond his ranch. Something inside him told him that he should not ignore the feeling that had been growing for 2 days. But before he could mount Ranger, he heard the distant sound of horses. More than one. Jonas froze. The sound echoed faintly from the east, near the narrow dirt road leading toward town. As the riders grew closer, Jonas felt a quiet concern rise inside him. Visitors were rare out here, and unexpected visitors usually meant questions. He walked calmly back to the house and stepped inside. "Girls," he said softly but firmly, "someone is coming. Stay inside, all right?" Nalan immediately understood. Her eyes sharpened with worry, but she nodded. She reached for Dashi's hand and pulled her toward the bedroom. Jonas closed the door, gently behind them. He took a slow breath and stepped outside just as the riders appeared over the small hill. There were 4 of them, 3 wearing territorial scout jackets, and 1 dressed like a deputy from town. Their horses trotted in a straight line, creating small clouds of dust behind them. Jonas stood straight and still, waiting. The deputy was the first to speak. He had a friendly smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Morning, McCall," he called out. "Morning," Jonas replied politely. The deputy stopped his horse a few feet away. "We're looking for a couple of young runaways," he said. "Two girls, Apache girls. You see anyone passing through here?" Jonas kept his expression calm. "Haven't seen anyone," he answered simply. One of the scouts leaned forward in his saddle. "We heard they might be nearby," he said. "Young troublemakers. Better if we find them before someone gets worried." Jonas felt something inside him tighten, but he didn't show it. "I've just been tending to my ranch. Haven't seen any children." The deputy nodded slowly, as if thinking through Jonas's words. His eyes drifted toward the barn, then toward the house. "Mind if we take a look around?" he asked. Jonas's heart thumped, but his voice stayed calm. "There's nothing here but me and my horse. I'd rather you didn't disturb anything. I keep the place in order." The scouts shared a look. Jonas recognized that kind of look, people deciding whether to push further or back off. The deputy forced a chuckle. Of course. Just doing our job," he said. "You know how it is." Jonas nodded but did not move aside. After a long moment that stretched like dry rubber, the deputy tugged on his reins. "All right then. If you see anything unusual, you let us know." "I will," Jonas said. "We'll be riding around the hills today," the deputy added, his tone light but his eyes watchful. Unfinished business. The scouts turned their horses and rode off, heading toward the mesa. Jonas waited until they disappeared over the ridge before letting out the long breath he had been holding. He knew without question that those men were not telling him the full truth. Their story felt thin, like fabric stretched too far. And the words, "runaways," sounded wrong. He stepped back inside his home. The girls were standing near the bedroom door, waiting quietly. Their faces told him they had heard everything. "It's all right," Jonas said softly. "They're gone for now." Nalin approached him slowly. She lifted her hand and made a small gesture, touching her chest and then pointing outside. Jonas didn't know exactly what she meant, but he felt the weight of her message. "They're looking for you," he said gently. "But I won't let anyone take you." Dashi stepped closer to him, clutching his sleeve. Her small fingers trembled. Jonas knelt beside her and said in a calm voice, "You're safe with me. I promise." That afternoon, Jonas checked the area around the ranch again. The scouts' horses had left clear tracks. It looked like they circled wide around his property before heading toward the open hills. He hoped they would not return soon. When he came back inside, he found something unexpected. An Apache elder stood at the edge of his yard. He was tall, with silver hair tied back and a calm but wise expression. He had approached silently, without disturbing a single thing. Jonas stopped where he was, unsure whether to be cautious or relieved. The elder raised his hand in a peaceful greeting. Jonas nodded slowly. The man spoke in soft English. "I am looking for two young girls," he said quietly. "Their names are Nalin and Dashi." Jonas's breath caught. He studied the elder's face carefully. There was no hint of threat in his eyes, only deep concern and tired patience. "They're safe," Jonas said. "Inside." The elder bowed his head slightly. "May I see them?" he asked. Jonas hesitated just long enough to be sure, then opened the door. The girls stepped out slowly. The moment they saw the elder, their faces changed, their eyes widened with recognition, and they rushed to him. He placed his hands gently on their heads, speaking to them in their own language. Jonas watched quietly, feeling a calm settle over him for the first time that day. The elder turned to Jonas. "You helped them," he said, gratitude warming his voice. "Thank you." "They were alone," Jonas replied simply. "I couldn't leave them," the elder nodded. "You did the right thing," Jonas asked. "Who were those men looking for them?" "They said the girls were runaways." The elder's expression darkened, but he kept his voice peaceful. "They were not runaways. They witnessed something they should not have seen. Some men wished to keep a secret hidden, A secret? Jonas repeated. The elder nodded. A secret about land. A secret that could harm many families if it spreads. Jonas took this in slowly. Suddenly, the footprints, the scouts, the strange symbol on Nalin's wrist, they all felt connected. The elder placed a hand on Nalin's shoulder. These girls carry the truth. And the truth is something some people fear. Jonas looked at the girls, then at the elder. What do we do now? The elder met his eyes with steady calm. We keep them safe. And when the time is right, we will bring the truth to the place where it must be heard. Jonas glanced toward the distant hills, where the scouts had disappeared. He knew this peaceful land was about to change. He knew people with hidden motives would not give up easily. He knew the girl's presence had pulled him into something larger than himself. But when he looked at Nalin and Dashi, standing beside the elder with trust shining in their eyes, Jonas felt no hesitation. Whatever came next, he would face it. He was part of their story now. The next few days passed quietly at the ranch. Though Jonas could feel a growing tension in the air, Nalin and Dashi stayed close to him and the elder, listening, learning, and slowly becoming comfortable in the warmth of the small home. The elder, who introduced himself as Gray Antelope, spoke softly and patiently, guiding the girls and teaching Jonas some words in their language so he could communicate more easily. Each morning, Jonas would rise early, tending to the horses in the fields, while keeping an eye on the girls. He began to notice their unique abilities, the way Nalin observed every small detail, the way Dashi seemed to sense emotions and intentions without being told. These gifts, Gray Antelope explained, were part of who they were, helping their people survive in a world that could be unfair and dangerous. Gray Antelope spent much of the day speaking with Jonas. He explained the truth that had been hidden. The girls had witnessed the dishonest plans of certain men in the town and the nearby territory. These men wanted to claim land that belonged to the Apache community, using tricks, lies, and false stories to make it appear they were doing the right thing. The girls had seen a part of this scheme, papers, maps, and conversations that proved the men's intentions. That was why the scouts and the deputy had come searching for them. Jonas listened carefully, feeling a mix of anger and concern. He realized that by helping the girls, he had not just protected them, he had become part of a larger story, a story that could affect many people. He also understood that revealing the truth would not be simple. Many people in the town trusted the deputy and the scouts, and some might not believe the girls' words. Gray Antelope told Jonas, "The girls' safety is most important now. The truth will wait until the right moment. But someone must help protect them until then." Jonas nodded. "I will," he said firmly. "No one will harm them under my watch." Over the next days, Jonas observed the girls' courage and intelligence. Nalin began to draw small maps of the land on scraps of paper, showing where she had seen the important places and where the men had tried to hide evidence. Dashi would point out details in the maps that Jonas, or even Gray Antelope, had missed: small paths, hidden streams, places where people could hide or gather safely. Jonas realized that the girls' survival skills were remarkable. They had been through frightening experiences, yet they remained calm, wise beyond their years, and willing to trust him. He began to feel a deep sense of responsibility not only for keeping them safe, but also for helping them carry the truth carefully and wisely. One evening, as the sun began to sink behind the hills, Gray Antelope gathered Jonas and the girls outside the house. The air was soft and warm, the sky painted in shades of orange and pink. Gray Antelope spoke in his calm, steady voice. "The men who search for the girls will return," he said. "They do not know the full story, but they are determined. You must be prepared. You have already protected them. But the next steps require caution." Jonas looked at the girls. Nalin held Dashi's hand tightly, but her eyes showed strength and determination. Jonas knew they understood that what they carried, the maps, the information, was important, and that sometimes being brave meant staying calm even when danger was near. The next morning, Jonas and the girls left the ranch quietly, with Gray Antelope leading the way. They traveled through hidden paths along the hills, avoiding the main roads and trails that the scouts might check. Jonas had never realized how much land could hide small passages, secret streams, and safe areas among the rocks. Gray Antelope's knowledge of the land was remarkable. During their journey, Jonas watched the girls carefully. He saw how Nalin noticed small signs of movement in the distance. Disturbed leaves, footprints in soft soil, a broken twig. Dashi would point out unusual sounds, the creak of a distant branch, the soft rustle of animals or people in the distance. Together, the girls and Jonas moved like a team, careful and alert, but calm. They camped under the open sky, where the stars shone bright and clear. Jonas showed the girls how to make a small, safe fire for warmth and cooking. They ate simply corn, beans, and bread, but even in simplicity, Jonas noticed the joy in their eyes as they shared stories and whispered laughter. The bond between them was growing stronger, and Jonas felt a quiet hope rising in his heart. As they traveled further from the town and toward the safe areas that Gray Antelope knew, the elder spoke again. "The truth must be shared," he said. "But not before the girls are ready. Some people will not believe easily. Some people are guided by greed or fear. We must choose the moment carefully." Jonas nodded. He understood that this was not only about safety but also about timing, about strategy, and about patience. He had spent many years alone on his land, but now he realized that protecting these children and the truth was more important than solitude. Finally, after several days of careful travel, they arrived at a secluded settlement where the Apache community lived. Families welcomed Nalin and Dashi with quiet joy, hugs, and soft words in their own language. The girls were home, surrounded by people who understood them and who would help them feel safe. Jonas watched from a distance, feeling both relief and a sense of pride. He had helped them reach this place, and he had kept them safe when the world outside could have been dangerous. The girls looked back at him, their eyes bright with gratitude. Nalin gave a small nod, and Dashi waved softly. Jonas smiled and waved in return, feeling that he had done something meaningful. Gray Antelope turned to Jonas. "You have done more than protect them," he said. "You have taught them that there are people who care, who are honest, and who will stand by them. That is a lesson as important as the truth itself." Jonas felt a deep warmth in his chest. He had never imagined that a quiet rancher like him could play such a role in a story so important. He realized that even ordinary people could make extraordinary choices when the right moment came. In the following days, the community began to prepare carefully to reveal the truth about the land plans. Nalin and Dashi shared what they knew with trusted adults. With Gray Antelope helping to guide the process, Jonas stayed nearby, ensuring that the girls were safe, teaching them some English words, and helping them feel comfortable in their home. He noticed how quickly trust could grow when people worked together with honesty and care. Nalin and Dashi flourished under this guidance, their confidence growing, their smiles brighter, and their spirits lighter. Jonas felt that he, too, had grown not just in courage, but in understanding of responsibility, kindness, and the value of standing up for what is right. Finally, the day came when the truth could be shared openly. The adults gathered, papers were shown, and stories were told. Those who had tried to hide their actions were exposed by the clear, calm testimony of Nalin and Dashi. The community, guided by Gray Antelope and Jonas, responded with careful decisions, ensuring fairness and protection for everyone involved. Jonas watched quietly, proud of the girls. They had faced uncertainty and fear with courage, and they had done so without losing their kindness or their sense of fairness. He felt a deep satisfaction in knowing that he had played a small part in protecting them and helping the truth come to light. When the day ended, the sun sank low in the sky, and Jonas walked with the girls back to a quiet area near the settlement. The air was calm, filled with the sounds of nature. The girls smiled at him, their eyes filled with warmth. Nalin spoke softly in English this time. "Thank you, Jonas," Dashi added, "for keeping us safe." Jonas knelt down, smiling back. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "You were brave. You helped me too. And I'm proud of you both." The girls leaned close to him, holding his hands, and Jonas felt a quiet joy he had not known in years. He realized that the story was not only about danger or secrets, it was about trust, care, courage, and the choices people make to protect what is important. As evening turned into night, Jonas looked at the stars overhead. He thought about the journey, the challenges, and the lessons he had learned. He felt gratitude for the girls, for Gray Antelope, and for the simple truth that one person's choice to help could change the course of many lives. Jonas knew that life would continue with new challenges and responsibilities, but he also knew that he would always carry this story in his heart. He had learned that courage and kindness could come in small, quiet acts. And most of all, he had learned that even in a world that seemed uncertain and harsh, hope, honesty, and care could shine brightly. As he lay down that night, Jonas smiled, thinking of Nalin and Dashi safe and happy. The stars outside twinkled like tiny reminders that every life, every choice, and every act of care mattered. He closed his eyes, feeling a deep peace, knowing that he had done the right thing and that sometimes being a hero meant simply being there for someone in need.